This video is a short tutorial to assist you as you're trying to interpret your laboratory results from Precision Analytical. So your laboratory results will contain a few pages, and we're going to go through each one of those. So the first page is your classic laboratory result, which is going to show you the patient information and the physician information on the top, and then it's going to give each of the hormone results. So in this case, beta-pregnadiol is a progesterone metabolite. For this particular patient, you can see the status here in the middle is below range. The result, the units measured, and then you can see the reference range, the normal range, is 265 to 1612, and so you see that result of 256 is indeed below range. So you can see each of these hormones here. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tell exactly what's going on when you're just listing the hormones and their ranges, so we also supply them in a graphical form so you can put a little bit more context to what those results mean. So in this context, the reference ranges, which are the same reference ranges that you've seen on the previous page, are represented by the stars on these gauges. And so what's in between those stars is the quote-unquote normal range, and then the patient result then sits in the middle with the dial pointing towards whatever that patient result might be. So you can see in this example, this patient, which is a female, has a testosterone result of 6.7. So the reference range is 6.2 to 17.5. So as expected, 6.7 will put the patient on the lower end of the reference range. But as we look over here at some of these metabolites, you can see that for this particular patient, the reference range for this hormone is 14 to 44, and she's at 61.2, which is, of course, well outside of the reference range. So moving down to one of the estrogens down here, so estrone or E1, again, the reference range 14 to 27.1, and this patient's result is below that range, and you can see that reflected in the results there. So it's an easier way to see the patient's result relative to not only the reference range but also the flow of hormones as the body metabolizes them. So within the way we're plotting them here, then when you see a result where the dial is pointing straight towards the middle top, so then that's going to represent essentially exactly average within the population. As you move to the left from that, then you'd be below average until you're at a point where you're out of the reference range, and then you'd be designated as low. And then of course likewise as you move to the right, you'd be on the higher part of normal out in here, and then as you get outside the reference range, then of course the result would be classified as elevated. So the other representation that we have on here are these indices, which are represented by the fan style gauge. So in this case, we're looking at methylation activity, and that's to look at a particular conversion within the body. So methylation is a protective action that the body takes hydroxyestrogens, in this case 2-hydroxy-E1, and then there's a methylation process to 2-methoxy-E1. And so you can see for these two patients, they have identical 2-hydroxy estrogens, but their 2-methoxyestrogens are quite a bit different. The one on the top is quite a bit higher, and so you can see that this 4.8 on the dial is a little bit higher than what the 2-hydroxy parent hormone is, and so that methylation activity is relatively high. On the bottom then, the relative activity of the methylation is a little on the lower side, as that process of methylation is less efficient for that person. So those will help you sort of gauge how the body is metabolizing at different steps. So the hormone profile, the comprehensive hormone profile, is broken into two separate profiles. The hormone metabolite assessment, which includes progesterone metabolites, androgen metabolites, and estrogen metabolites, which is plotted on page 1. And then on page 2 is the graphical representation showing progesterone metabolism, androgen metabolism, estrogen metabolism, and then there's another section which relates to androgens as well for 5-alpha reductase activity. So those are the separate components that make up that, and we'll go through these in separate tutorials. If you're looking for information on any of these sections, you can look at our other videos for that. Page 3 and 4 of the comprehensive hormone profile are for the advanced adrenal assessment, which includes cortisol and its metabolites as well as DHEAS, and you can see that as well graphically. And again, there'll be a separate video to go through the specifics of this, but you can see on the top of this report is simply a graphical representation of what goes on within the body during stress, and then you can see the hormone results of cortisol and DHEAS, as well as some of the indices for their metabolism, which has a lot of clinical relevance, and again, we'll get into that in more detail in a different video. Additionally, along with this information, then we also give, lastly, the pattern of daily free cortisol, which is unique to our testing, usually found in urine, and you can see for this particular patient, the black lines represent the reference range, so results typically are going up in the morning and then back down throughout the day, but this particular patient, who happens to be one that's particularly stressed, you can see that their results are high throughout the day, and that's, of course, has clinical relevance. So we want to look at those patterns. So that concludes the report, and that I hope will help give you a little bit of context in terms of trying to understand those results and what those numbers mean. So lastly, then, there are comments specific to your patient. So the first is the patient comments, which can be seen sort of as introductory level comments regarding the results. When you see comments that are in lowercase, those are educational generic comments that we hope will help you understand. And then the all caps comments there are specific to the results, symptoms, demographics of your patient, very specific to your situation. And then lastly is an analogous set of notes for the provider, which are at a higher level in terms of the level of detail about the metabolism and some of these processes, as well as some treatment suggestions that might be included. So patients, if you have questions, should refer those to your healthcare provider, and they can help you answer those questions. And you can also see our other educational videos on more specific topics as we go through each of the sections of these reports to try to understand the different components of those.